twist tonight in the Gippsland mushroom mystery.
Extend the mystery mushroom lunch.
Shock new details in Victoria's deadly mushroom case.
Fresh details in the Leongatha mushroom murder trial with the revealed of the alleged killer the day after.
On the icy winter's morning of 31st of July 2023, Dr. Chris Webster began his 24-hour shift at the small urgent care department at Leongatha Hospital, about a 2-hour drive southeast from Melbourne, Victoria, when at approximately 8:05 a.m, a woman wearing a blue surgical mask presented to the emergency room claiming symptoms of poisoning. She told the staff that she felt dehydrated, expecting they might administer her with a saline solution, but to the medical staff watching her, something seemed off. She did not look physically unwell in the usual sense. No discoloration in her skin, no obvious weakness in her body. Instead, her face would carry a distant, vacant expression, an unsettling look, as if she wasn't fully present. She sat in the waiting area for a short while until Dr. Webster approached, apologizing for keeping her waiting. He explained to her that he was juggling 2 critically unwell patients in urgent care that were not doing well and needed his attention. They were suspected to be suffering from mushroom poisoning after a family lunch just 2 days earlier. 4 guests had attended the lunch, and all were now gravely ill. The doctor asked the woman, "Why are you here today?" And she responded curtly, saying, "I think I've got gastro." Gastro is short for gastroenteritis, a common infection of the stomach and intestines which can cause nausea, vomiting, cramps, and diarrhea. It didn't take long for the doctor to connect the dots, her timing, the symptoms. They all pointed in one direction. Concerned that she may go down the same path as his other patients, he immediately asked for her name. She gave it, and instantly he recognized it. The name belonged to the host of that fatal lunch. Trying to stay composed, Dr. Webster pressed further. He told her that Dandenong Hospital, approximately 90 minutes drive away, is on alert for possible death cap mushroom poisoning, one of the deadliest known toxins to the human body. As little as half a death cap mushroom contains enough toxin to kill an adult human, and they are responsible for 90% of mushroom-related fatalities every year. Suspicious, he asked her point blank, with his eyes focused on hers, "Where did you get the mushrooms?" Without hesitation, and just as direct as Dr. Webster's question, the woman immediately replied, "Woolworths," naming one of Australia's biggest supermarket chains. The hospital staff urged her to be admitted and transferred to Dandenong Hospital as they were concerned about a possible mass poisoning event. But she resisted. She said she has animals to feed, children with after-school activities, life to return to. When Dr. Webster stressed the seriousness of the situation, her composure cracked. She panicked, bolting to the exit, discharging herself against medical advice. Within just 5 minutes of walking in, she was gone. Worried that the woman may also suffer the same fate, Dr. Webster tried calling her phone again and again, but he was unable to get an answer. Then, acting on instinct, he dialed Australia's emergency number, 000, to alert his concern to the police. He advised the operator that there was a lunch held at a nearby residence just 2 days earlier, and 4 of the 5 attendees were now in intensive care, fighting for their lives after being exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning. A woman who just walked out of his hospital is suspected to be the 5th and final person who attended the lunch. At 9:48 a.m, the woman shortly represented back at Leongatha Hospital. This time, Dr. Webster asked the question that he dreaded the most. "Did your children eat the same meal?" Without emotion, and with the same distant look that she had carried since walking in, she answered, "They did." The doctor urged the woman to bring her children in for assessment, but she was reluctant. She believed that there was a possibility of the children being frightened by the experience of being taken out of school. Dr. Webster's patience was gone, saying bluntly, "Well, they can be scared and alive, or dead." As the woman was being treated by medical staff, the police attended the woman's house and looked through her bins in search of a brown paper Woolworths bag, which she advised would contain the leftovers from the lunch 2 days prior. The bag was retrieved from the bottom of her bin and was brought back to the hospital for analysis. By 1:04 p.m, Another doctor from the hospital, Dr. Veronica Foote, was laying out the contents of the bag, discovering the remnants of a stale-looking pastry with a brown, finely chopped mushroom filling. What those mushrooms truly were, and what they meant for the people who had eaten them, would soon ignite major headlines, not just across Australia, but around the world. 2 days before the tragedy, 5 people sat down for a family lunch. 4 of the people tied by family, community, and faith. Ordinary people, but in the best possible way. The kind of people that selflessly made life in a small Victorian town easier for those around them. Gail and Donald Patterson had built their lives in the quiet green hills of Korumburra, a close-knit community of around 5,000 people, about 90 minutes drive from Melbourne. Gail and Don were the kind of people who stitched themselves into the fabric of their town, becoming pillars of their community not only through their occupations, but through their steady service and quiet generosity. They were a team, working at life together, their son Simon would later say. They met young, fell in love, and married in November of 1973. By the time of that fateful lunch in July 2023, they had both recently turned 70 and were just months away from celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They raised 4 children together, balancing the demands of family life with the careers they both devoted their lives to, teaching. For Gail, the classroom was more than just a workplace. She believed in lifting up the children who had slipped through the cracks, running a learning assistance program where she patiently offered encouragement, stability, and dignity. Don carried that same philosophy into his own teaching. To his students, he was more than just a teacher. He was a caring mentor, someone with a respected voice who listened, who guided, and who inspired. Don and Gail were devout Christians and former missionaries who were guided by their faith and service for others. In the words of one local community member, "You couldn't have met more gentle, giving, kind people." Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, shared that same instinct to give. Just like her older sister, she had also been a teacher, and like Gail, she worked in the very same learning assistance program, helping children who needed extra support. Helping wasn't something Heather did for recognition, it was simply part of who she was. Heather's generosity also extended beyond the classroom. She spent years in a role at Milpara House, teaching recent arrivals to Australia, helping them find their footing in a new country. Heather's husband, Ian Wilkinson, had served as the pastor of Korumburra Baptist Church since 1999, leading his congregation for nearly a quarter of a century. In a small town like Korumburra, Ian was the person people turned to in times of loss or crisis, or when they just needed someone to sit and talk to. Together, Ian and Heather raised 4 children of their own, building their family lives on service, compassion for others, and humility. It wasn't unusual for Gail, Don, Heather, and Ian to gather around the table for a family lunch. They were family, after all. Meals together were a chance to reconnect, to share stories, and to laugh about old memories. But this lunch had carried a strange weight. The setting had shifted. Not at the usual Patterson home, not at the Wilkinson home, but elsewhere at a residence in Leongatha. 5 people sat down that day, 4 who had spent their lives giving to others, guided by faith and community, and a 5th, the one who prepared the meal. And within hours after the meal, the first signs of illness would begin: nausea, pain, discomfort that grew sharper, more severe, until it became clear that this wasn't just food poisoning. Something darker had taken hold. What began as a family meal in the small town of Leongatha would soon unravel into one of Australia's most chilling modern tragedies. The 5th person at that table that day was their host, Erin Patterson. Once married to Gail and Don's son Simon, Erin still lived close by in the neighbouring town of Leongatha. On the surface, Erin simply appeared to be extending an olive branch to reconnect with the family, but within days, 3 of her guests would be gone, and 1 would be left fighting for their life. Before long, that table in Leongatha would become the focus of police, prosecutors, and eventually the world's media. And at the very centre of it all was Erin Patterson. But who was their host, and how was she connected to the story which would grip Australia's headlines for years? Erin Patterson was born Erin Scudder on 30th of September 1974. Growing up in the southeastern Melbourne suburb of Glen Waverley, she was the daughter of highly intellectual parents, with her mother a respected university lecturer at Monash University and an expert in children's literature, and her father a director in a major Australian company. Although Erin herself was quite intelligent, she was unable to commit herself to any singular path. She herself would be accepted into a science course at the University of Melbourne before later switching to accounting. Neither of these options would interest her, so she decided to switch courses again and would aim to become an air traffic controller. She stuck at it and eventually passed the notoriously difficult entrance test to become a fully fledged air traffic controller. Some of Erin's colleagues in the air services recalled her as a solitary figure, an odd loner, while others remembered her as abrupt and abrasive when she spoke to people. Her small, close-knit training group of 14 people seemed to joke and support each other, but Erin would refuse to be part of the laughter. She kept her distance, constantly quiet and detached. At one point, Erin felt bullied when nicknames such as Crazy Erin and Scudder the Nutter were used against her. There were also stories of questionable behaviour. One former colleague later told the ABC that Erin would sometimes pull pranks, recalling one time where Erin called the air traffic control centre, pretending to be another worker calling in sick so that Erin could pick up the extra shifts for herself. They remembered Erin giggling quietly in the corner of the room when a confused air controller was being questioned by her manager, who asked, "Why are you here? Didn't you call in sick?" Her time as an air traffic controller only lasted 3 years. Afterwards, she worked in animal management for the RSPCA at Monash City Council in Melbourne's southeast. It was there, in 2004, where she met her future husband, Simon Patterson, the son of Gail and Don. Simon was working as a civil engineer for the council and was drawn to Erin's wit, humour and intelligence. They would bond over their shared love of the outdoors. At the time, Erin identified as a fundamental atheist, while, conversely, Simon was a Christian. Erin would eventually convert to Christianity after attending her first church service at Korumburra Baptist Church, where Ian Wilkinson was pastor. It was also around this time when Erin had her first significant encounter with the law. In June 2004, Erin was involved in a drunken car accident in Glen Waverley while driving an unregistered vehicle and while she was 3 times over the legal blood alcohol limit. She refused to stop after the crash or provide her name and address. As a result, her license was cancelled and she was disqualified from driving in Victoria for 2.5 years. In July of 2006, Erin's paternal grandmother, Ora Scudder, passed away in Adelaide, leaving Erin with a significant inheritance of $2 million, dispersed over 8 years. It was money that seemed to secure her financial future. 3 years after they first met, Erin and Simon Patterson married in June of 2007 at the Korumburra Anglican Church. Erin's parents didn't attend the wedding, reportedly travelling in Russia at the time. Soon after the wedding, Erin and Simon both quit their council jobs and began travelling around Australia. Once Erin and Simon reached Western Australia, they bought a home outright, and Erin opened a second-hand bookstore in the small rural town of Pemberton, approximately 325 kilometres south of Perth. Their first son was born in early 2009, with Erin later explaining that the birth was very traumatic. The baby lost his heartbeat and required an emergency caesarean. Don and Gail visited in the weeks afterwards, offering their support. Gail helped Erin gain confidence as a new mother, showing her how to settle her son and reminded her to trust herself. Gail explained to Erin that she didn't have to stick to timeframes or schedules, and just to relax and enjoy her baby. Erin found Gail to be very supportive, gentle, and patient with her. In April 2009, Erin and Simon resumed their travels, but by November, they had returned to Victoria and bought a house in Korumburra near Simon's parents. In 2014, their daughter was born. Erin and Simon had a turbulent relationship. They experienced multiple separations, where Erin would stay in a cottage and Simon in an on-site van in a caravan park nearby. By 2015, they had separated permanently, but remained amicable, ensuring that they still cooperated as parents despite their issues. They shared custody of their 2 children and remained on friendly terms, even going on family holidays together. Erin's father had died in 2011 from cancer, and her mother would later pass away in 2019, also from cancer. Erin and her sister inherited their parents' estate, including a beachfront home in Eden, New South Wales, which they sold in 2019 for $900,000 Australian dollars. Despite her separation from Simon, Erin maintained a close bond with his extended family. She provided interest-free loans worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to Simon's siblings and their partners, helping them purchase homes. By 2022, however, tensions with Simon began to surface. A tax return filed by his accountant listed Simon as single, which made Erin ineligible for government child support payments. According to Simon, it was an error made by his accountant, but the change also led to Simon being advised by federal authorities to stop paying school fees and medical costs for the children. Advice he would follow. The issue strained their relationship further, with Erin harbouring resentful sentiments toward him for not financially supporting his own children. Between November 2021 and September of 2022, Simon was hospitalised 3 times with gastrointestinal symptoms. On the second occasion, he fell into a coma and required life-saving surgery. Each time, the illnesses were followed by meals prepared by Erin, a toxic penne pasta, a chicken korma curry, and a vegetable wrap. A medical expert's report stated that Simon's symptoms were consistent with the ingestion of barium carbonate, a compound found in rat poison. 18 months prior to Simon's first illness, Erin posted several pictures of mushrooms to a Facebook webpage on the 5th of May 2020 titled Poisons Help, Emergency Identification for Mushrooms and Plants. Using the name Erin, she wrote, "My cat chewed on this mushroom just now. He is having a vomit. Was in grassland near trees. I'm in Victoria, Australia." But Erin had never owned a cat. Suspicious behaviour she likely thought would remain hidden would soon be revealed for all of the world to see. In the 2 years leading up to the family lunch on the 29th of July 2023, Erin had grown more distant from her in-laws. She missed several family events, and at others, she attended only briefly. Erin later said that she was hurt after believing that she had been invited as an afterthought to Gail's 70th birthday celebration earlier that year. But in 2019, before her own name would dominate headlines, Erin Patterson was already immersed in the world of true crime. Among a Facebook community of 2,000 people devoted to the case of Kelly Lane, a woman who was found guilty of killing her 2-day-old daughter in one of Australia's most notorious cases, Erin was known as a super sleuth. Members admired her research skills, her persistence, and her knack for digging up information online. From that larger group, Erin and a handful of other members splintered off into a private chat, a smaller circle where they not only discussed online crime, but had also shared parts of their personal lives. Digital forensic officers would later recover messages from Erin's phone to that group. In them, she expressed deep frustration with Simon and his parents. At one point, she described her extended family as a lost cause and wrote that she wanted nothing to do with them. These messages were sent just 8 months before she hosted the fatal lunch. Investigators also found that Erin's phone had been factory reset multiple times in the week after 29th of July 2023. On her Samsung tablet, they uncovered photographs of dried, yellowish mushrooms in a food dehydrator, apparently taken inside of her own home. Metadata showed that the images were captured on the 4th of May 2023, around 3 months before the lunch. The tablet also contains screenshots of internet searches, among them stage 4A cancer, stage 4 ovarian cancer, and lymphoma. Details like these would soon form part of the growing web of evidence that turned a family meal into one of Australia's most chilling modern investigations. During the coronavirus outbreak beginning in 2020, Victoria would be placed into a total of 7 lockdowns. Residents of the state were advised that there were only 5 reasons to leave their homes, which included shopping for food and supplies within a 5-kilometre radius of your home, exercise for up to 2 hours per day, to provide compassionate care, caregiving and medical reasons, for authorised work, and to get vaccinated. Victorians spent a total of 262 days under lockdown during the outbreak, leaving many people finding themselves with idle time and new hobbies. For Erin Patterson, this would be the time when she developed an interest in wild mushrooms. She began taking her children to Korumburra Botanic Gardens and nearby bushland where her interest in fungi grew. Digital evidence would later reveal just how deep that interest went. On 28th of May 2022, Erin's computer was used to search Bing for death cap mushroom sightings, directing her to the citizen science website iNaturalist, where members upload and identify plants and fungi from around the world. By April and May of 2023, fresh iNaturalist posts reported death cap mushrooms in the nearby towns of Loch and Outram, only a 10-minute drive from Erin's home at the time in Korumburra. Phone tower records would later show that Erin would make multiple visits to these exact locations of death cap mushrooms within 10 days of the iNaturalist posts. One visit stood out in court records on the morning of 28th of April 2023. Erin's phone was traced to Lock, the site of a death cap report. Hours later, at 12:17 p.m, Erin purchased a $229 Sunbeam Food Lab electronic dehydrator from a white goods store in Leongatha. Between March and May of 2023, Erin began experimenting with her dehydrator. In her private true crime Facebook group, she shared posts about drying store-bought mushrooms, grinding them into a powder, and mixing them into her children's chocolate brownies, framing it as a way to boost their nutritional value. But in what sounded like an ordinary kitchen experiment would later take on a far more unsettling significance. Though Erin and Simon were not regularly communicating, Erin would still attend Korumburra Baptist Church roughly every 2 weeks. On 28th of June 2023, Erin told Gail and Don that she had an appointment at St. Vincent's Hospital and would tell Gail the following day that a biopsy was taken from a lump off her elbow. At the conclusion of the Sunday service on 16th of July, Erin approached her estranged husband, Simon. She invited him, his parents Gail and Don, and Gail's sister Heather and brother-in-law Ian Wilkinson to have lunch together at her newly built home in Leongatha in 2 weeks' time to discuss some medical issues that she had. Simon suggested a morning tea instead, to which Erin responded firmly, "I want it to be lunch." A friend of Simon's, Dr. Ford, who was also present at the church service that day, recalled Simon later confiding that he would politely decline the invitation. At the time, Ian and Heather's relationship with Erin was friendly and amicable, but it didn't have much depth. They would see each other more like acquaintances, but nonetheless, they were happy to be invited to the event. Ian would later say that he had hoped that the lunch may result in an improved relationship with Erin. Simon would send a text message to Erin at 6:54 p.m. on the 28th of July saying, "Sorry, I feel too uncomfortable about coming to the lunch with you, Mum, Dad, Heather and Ian tomorrow, but I'm happy to talk about your health and implications of that at another time if you'd like to discuss on the phone." By 6:59 p.m, Erin expressed her disappointment, writing, "That's really disappointing. I've spent many hours this week preparing lunch for tomorrow, which has been exhausting in light of the issues I'm facing, and spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet to make Beef Wellingtons because I want it to be a special meal, as I may not be able to host a lunch like this again for some time. It's important to me that you're all there tomorrow and that I can have the conversations that I need to have. I hope you'll change your mind. Your parents and Heather and Ian are coming at 12:30. I hope to see you there." But Simon did not change his mind and would not attend the lunch. The next day, on the 29th of July 2023, at around 12 p.m, Erin dropped her 9-year-old daughter and 14-year-old son off at a McDonald's restaurant to meet a friend before they would head to a cinema. She told them that she was hosting an adults-only lunch at home. The 4 lunch guests would arrive at Erin's house in Leongatha at approximately 12:30 p.m. Erin greeted them at the door of her new house and led them into the open-plan kitchen, dining, and living area. Gail and Heather poked their heads into the pantry, but Erin seemed reluctant to let them look inside. When they offered to help in the kitchen, Erin waved them off, saying that she had everything under control. At the dining table, Ian sat at the head, with Gail and Don to his right, and Heather and Erin to his left. Erin plated and served each meal one by one. On the menu, individual beef Wellingtons resembling pasties, with green beans and mashed potatoes, following a recipe from Nagi Mahashi's popular cookbook, Dinner. Each meal was served on a large, grey-coloured plate. Erin would eventually join them at the dining table, picking up a smaller, orangey tan-coloured plate for herself. The food was well received. Ian, Heather and Don cleared their plates. Gail ate much of hers, and Don finished the rest. Dessert followed, a fruit platter prepared by Heather and an orange cake brought by Gail. When the table was cleared, Erin shared the medical news that had prompted the gathering. She told them that she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer and believed it was life-threatening. She asked for advice on how to break the news to her children. The family offered their sympathies, and Don suggested that she should be honest with her children. The conversation ended abruptly when Erin's children returned home, and Ian closed the gathering with a prayer. The guests departed at around 3 p.m. Approximately 11 to 12 hours after the lunch, everything had changed. That night, each guest had developed severe gastroenteritis-like symptoms, which included nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. By 8:45 a.m, Don phoned his son Simon, explaining that he and Gail were violently ill with vomiting and diarrhea and were on their way to the hospital. Around this time, Don heard from Heather. She and Ian were also suffering from the very same symptoms. By 9:15 a.m, an ambulance would arrive at Don and Gail's residence to deliver them to Korumburra Hospital. Simon, shaken by the news, rushed to collect Ian and Heather, driving them himself to Leongatha Hospital. Disturbed by the sudden and severe illnesses on both sides of the family, he also phoned his friend, Dr. Ford. Already aware of Simon's earlier unexplained medical episodes, Dr. Ford quickly warned hospital staff of a darker possibility: poisoning. All 4 lunch guests were eventually transferred to Dandenong Hospital and then to Austin Hospital in Heidelberg as their conditions worsened. 2 days later, on 31st of July 2023, Erin would present herself to Leongatha Hospital but would appear clinically well the next day and would be subsequently discharged from hospital. Despite intensive medical treatment, Heather, Gail, and Don's health would continue to deteriorate. At 2:50 a.m. on the 4th of August, Heather would pass away from altered liver function and multiple organ failure with a clinical diagnosis of Amanita mushroom poisoning. Later the same day, at 5:55 p.m, Gail would also pass away from the same illness. By 11:30 p.m. on the 5th of August, Don would pass away from refractory multiple organ failure secondary to altered liver function due to clinically diagnosed Amanita mushroom poisoning. All 3 deaths were linked and clinically diagnosed as the result of Amanita mushroom poisoning. Only Ian Wilkinson survived. Ian's condition would gradually improve and he was extubated on the 14th of August and discharged to a rehabilitation ward on 11th of September 2023. 4 people sat down to Erin's table that day and only 1 person survived. On 30th of July, the day after the lunch, when her 4 guests presented to the hospital, Erin drove her son to Taiab for a flying lesson, a suburb approximately 1 hour's drive from her home in Leongatha. However, the lesson was cancelled at the last minute due to poor weather. On the way home at 3:20 p.m, CCTV cameras captured Erin at a service station in Caldermead, where she would enter a bathroom in white pants and re-emerged just 9 seconds later. That same day, Simon spoke with Erin about the deteriorating conditions of her guests. Erin would mention that she too had been suffering from diarrhea during the day. By 31st of July, Erin presented at Leongatha Hospital, where her interactions with Dr. Chris Webster began. A day later, on 1st of August, Erin would be transferred to Monash Medical Centre, where she would then be assessed by another doctor. Erin would be discharged the following day at 1 p.m. While Erin was being treated in the hospital in Leongatha the day prior, she told Dr. Chris Webster that she purchased the mushrooms from Woolworths. But after being questioned by the Department of Health the following day, she changed her story, now claiming that she brought dried mushrooms in a sealed packet from an Asian grocer. To many, it sounded like an ordinary correction, but to others, it planted a subtle idea. By invoking an Asian grocer, Erin wasn't just naming a shop, she was naming a community. In a country where stereotypes still linger about the unfamiliar packaging or labels not in English, her explanation carried more weight than the words themselves and let old prejudice do the heavy lifting. It suggested this could happen to anyone, while quietly shifting suspicion away from her own kitchen. Dozens of Asian grocers across Melbourne's southeast were searched, and it was discovered that only 1 store was selling repackaged mushrooms, but there would be no supplier changes or non-commercially grown mushrooms discovered. On 2nd of August, CCTV footage would capture Erin's red car arrive and park outside of a large green shed at Coonawarra Transfer Station and Landfill. Erin was seen retrieving an item from the car's boot, which resembled a large black box, and she would carry the item into the shed. When she re-emerged, the item was no longer with her. That same day, digital forensic officers later discovered that Erin had conducted a factory reset on her second phone, one she began using by 12th of February 2023. By 3rd of August, police launched an official investigation into the 29th of July lunch. And the next day, 4th of August, officers would travel to Coonawarra Transfer Station and Landfill and discovered a black Sunbeam food dehydrator in an e-waste bin. Scientific analysis confirmed 2 things. Erin's fingerprints were on it, and residues of Amanita phalloides, death cap mushrooms, remained on its clear trays. homicide detectives executed a search warrant on Erin's Leongatha home on the 5th of August, where police would spend 4 hours looking through the residence. During the search, Erin was cooperative with the police and showed them around. The police seized multiple mobile phones, a Samsung tablet, a computer, and several SIM cards. Investigators later discovered that one SIM card had been used across multiple devices over a 4-year period, and that Erin had operated secondary phones. One mobile device, seen in hospital footage with a pink phone case, was never recovered. At her home, Erin gave the investigator access to what would appear to be her personal mobile phone, though this device had an orange case. Erin claimed that she could not recall the PIN code to access the device. Police would later believe that the device that Erin provided during the investigation was a dummy phone, and that same night, Erin remotely reset it while it was in police custody. By approximately 5 p.m. the same day, Erin would be taken to Wonthaggi police station and was interviewed by Detective Leading Senior Constable Stephen Eppingstall. During the interview, Detective Eppingstall would question Erin about a Sunbeam Food Lab electronic dehydrator instruction manual, which was found in her kitchen's far left bottom drawer. He would ask Erin if she owned a dehydrator, and she would reply simply no, explaining that she has manuals for all kinds of appliances that she'd collected over the years. The detective pushed on with his questioning, asking when she owned a dehydrator, but Erin could not recall. Yet, the manual matched the exact model found in the Coonawarra tip, which bared her fingerprints and mushroom residue. At another point in the interview, Detective Eppingstall would mention that his team have concerns in relation to the mushrooms and where they had come from. He questioned Erin and asked her directly if she'd ever foraged for mushrooms in the past. Erin firmly responded, never. She would also deny ever preserving or dehydrating foods in the past. By 11th of August, the Department of Health concludes its investigation and is unable to find any store selling mushrooms that matched Erin's description. Months later, on the 2nd of November 2023, police would again search Erin Patterson's home. But this time, she was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder relating to the deaths of Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson and the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. She was remanded to Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, a maximum security women's prison located west of Melbourne. On 7th of May 2024, wearing a royal blue jumper and with her hands clasped in front of her, Erin appeared in the courtroom via video link from the women's prison where she was being held. Erin would plead not guilty to the murder and attempted murder charges and elected to fast-track her case, meaning she would skip a committal hearing in the Magistrates Court and would proceed to what is known as Section 198 proceeding in the Supreme Court, where the evidence against her would be tested for the first time. On 19th of April 2025, Erin Patterson was brought before the Supreme Court of Victoria. She requested that the trial be held not in Melbourne, but in Morwell, closer to the community where the story had first unfolded. Her request would be approved. By 28th of April, a jury consisting of 10 men and 5 women would be selected, with 3 being designated as reserve jurors. Conviction requires a unanimous verdict among the chosen 12. The trial would begin the following day inside the belly of the Latrobe Valley Magistrates Court in Morwell. From the outset, the scale of the case was clear. Charges that Erin had attempted to poison her estranged husband, Simon, during November 2021 and September 2022 were withdrawn, but the remaining charges, 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder, would soon grip the nation. For the next 10 weeks, Morwell became the unlikely centre of Australia's attention. During the trial days, Erin would be remanded to her cell in Morwell Police Station, next to the Morwell courtroom. She would be transported the 2.5-hour drive from the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre prison to the Morwell Police Station on Monday mornings and back on Friday evenings. The trial unfolded in the shadow of the 2025 federal election, but soon eclipsed it in the headlines. It had all the elements of a story that was impossible to ignore. A family tragedy, the widespread suspicion of deliberate poisoning, and the rare involvement of one of the world's deadliest fungi. The trial dominated headlines, filled news publications, and drew significant public interest both domestically and internationally. To manage the unprecedented coverage, the court imposed strict media rules. 6 seats were allocated daily to journalists via a daily ballot, and an overflow room was created to handle the rest. There would be no cameras in the courtroom, but every detail was reported in real time, dissected across news sites, talkback radio, and podcasts. The trial featured testimony from dozens of witnesses, including Erin's estranged husband Simon, sole survivor Ian Wilkinson, police, doctors, toxicologists, and digital forensic experts. The evidence was painstakingly laid out. Jurors saw the black sunbeam dehydrator recovered from a landfill, marked with Erin's fingerprints and tainted with death cap residue. They heard witnesses describe how she served her family on different plates, how she claimed the cancer diagnosis to justify the lunch, and how she refused medical checks when her guests fell ill. Digital forensic experts retraced her phone and computer activity, searches for death cap sightings, visits to mushroom foraging sites, online discussions of how she had hidden mushroom powder in food. Medical specialists testified that the guest's symptoms matched amanita phalloid poisoning, while Erin's own blood work showed no trace of the toxin. The defense acknowledged Erin's lies, but argued that the poisonings were a tragic accident caused by mixing wild and store-bought mushrooms. Erin herself testified on the 2nd of June, confessing to foraging mushrooms and fabricating her cancer claim, but maintaining that she never intended to kill. As the weeks passed, the trial became a national obsession. Each word spoken inside the courtroom became a headline within hours. Outside, commentators turned every detail into part of a narrative the public could not look away from. In their closing arguments, the prosecution alleged that Erin had deliberately poisoned the Beef Wellingtons and then staged illness and destroyed evidence to cover her tracks. They pointed to her shifting stories, the disposal of the dehydrator, and her refusal to cooperate with the doctors. The defense countered that her deception was born of panic, not malice. The desperate actions of a woman overwhelmed by tragedy. On the 30th of June, the jury was instructed by Justice Beale to decide on 4 points: whether Erin caused the deaths, whether it was deliberate, whether she intended serious harm, and whether she had lawful excuse. The jury deliberated for 6.5 days before they reached a unanimous decision. On 7th of July, 2025, the jury returned to the courtroom. Erin's eyes were locked onto them as the foreperson rose to speak. The verdict was clear: guilty of 3 murders and 1 attempted murder. She did not cry, she did not speak. Instead, she stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly as the weight of the decision settled over the silent room. At her pre-sentence hearing, families of the victims read statements of grief and anger. Ian Wilkinson, the lone survivor, offered forgiveness. Others spoke of lives shattered beyond repair. Prosecutors urged the court to impose life without parole, calling the crimes among the most shocking imaginable. While awaiting sentencing, she was remanded in near solitary confinement at the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, isolated for her safety and under intense media scrutiny. Her conditions involved being locked in her cell for up to 22 hours a day, with limited social interaction and restricted access to communal spaces. During his sentencing remarks, Justice Christopher Beale said the gravity of Erin Patterson's crimes meant that he must impose the maximum penalty. On the 8th of September 2025, Erin Patterson was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 33 years. She will be eligible for parole in 2056 when she is 83 years old, provided her sentence is not lengthened or increased. Throughout the trial, Erin Patterson had almost no visible support. Reports noted that the only person to stand by her was an online friend named Ali, who maintained occasional contact. No friends, colleagues, or non-family members were called to testify in her defense, a silence that underscored how deeply she had become isolated as the case unfolded. 4 guests sat down at Erin's table on that July afternoon. Only 1 survived, carrying scars that will last a lifetime. The jury's verdict may have brought legal closure, but what truly happened inside that house, and why, may always remain in shadow. One truth, however, is beyond a doubt. The story of Erin Patterson is one Australia will never forget.